Friend, welcome back to the show. In this episode, I'm joined by someone who shaped the way I think about media and podcasting, my friend Josh Raymer. Back when we worked together, Josh wasn't just my boss, he was a mentor. He helped me understand how to bring authors' voice to life through podcasting. And I learned so much from this man and really honed the way, not only just asking questions, but really how to approach the craft in of itself. Today, he's here to pull back the curtain on everything authors and experts need to know, how to launch a show, what gear and setup to use, where to publish your show, and maybe even how to become a sought-after guest. If you ever thought about using a podcast to grow your platform, this episode's for you. Josh, what's up, buddy?
Hussein, thanks so much for having me on, man. Big fan of the show, big fan of what you're doing. And we had some really fun conversations. And when we worked together trying to build the podcast department, we've thought a lot about this topic specifically for authors. And so I think this is going to be a fun conversation today. When we were talking before we got on mic, we said, we're going to kind of just empty out the basket here. Everything that authors have ever wanted to know about being a podcast guest, starting their own podcast, that's what we're going to pack into this episode. So really excited to dive into it. Yeah,
man. So before we get into all of this good stuff, I want to rewind back a little bit just to give people a little bit of scale as to, why you're my media guy. I go to you for all kinds of questions. By the way, we had Allie Raymer on the show a few episodes ago. She's Josh's wife. She's amazing. But I just want to throw that out there. Two incredible people that I've gotten to know over the last couple of years. But mostly, especially around this world of media, like how to approach it, how to set up not only your YouTube, all these kinds of things. Josh has been doing this. This is why I like this guy. He does the thing, and then he teaches the thing, which is amazing. So I want to rewind back. Do you remember the first moment you realized podcasting could be huge for authors?
Ooh, for authors, yes. This podcasting is something I have been doing. I actually went back and found the first ever episode that I ever did of a podcast. It was in August of 2008. It was the Average Joe's podcast for the National College Dodgeball Association. I was in the floor of my childhood bedroom. And so I've been doing this now, gosh, I guess that makes it 17 years almost that I've been doing podcasting. And so I've watched it evolve, right? When I was first getting into podcasting, I loved like the Bill Simmons BS Report, ESPN kind of personality. So I was very much in like the sports world. We've seen like true crime be a huge genre, right, for podcasting. And so recently, I think you have seen this shift in the kind of quote unquote traditional mainstream media becoming less and less instrumental in sharing ideas and kind of developing these new media personalities. And that's shifting in large part to like YouTube, podcast, influencers. And so as we've seen that shift kind of happen over like the last decade or so, that's when my eyes got opened to this could really be something for anyone that wants to share ideas with a wider audience, right? That was my goal when I started Average Joe's podcast back in 2008, was I want to grow this organization, the NCDA, and so I'm going to start something that I can broadcast out to the masses. I can take this beyond my college campus. And so I think as you've seen podcasting migrate from like this sort of niche into like this mainstream. I mean, we saw in the U.S. presidential election how much podcast played a role in how that played out, right? So it has evolved, and I think it slowly is becoming sort of the traditional mainstream media, and it is slowly replacing some of those stalwarts that we've long seen as like how people receive and disseminate information.
Yeah. I love that a lot, man, because when I worked with you at the publishing company and we were trying to bring this huge armature of podcasting and teaching people how to podcast, all that good, starting people's shows, what we both realized, and you really helped me come to terms with, is that, look, all these people are experts in their genre, in their thing. But for them to stand out even more is to own something, a show, right, that they can really tackle and bring on all these experts, right, that are within their niche, outside their niche even, whatever it may be. But to have these conversations is to solidify more of their credibility and more of their authority. And I hadn't really seen it like that before. Now, I started doing YouTube and random videos and things like that when I owned a print shop. And so I started podcasting literally in my print shop and in other people's like gyms and random places because I was trying to showcase my clientele, right? I was just trying to like say, look at what this cool person's doing at this gym. It's very unique. Check it out. And then I was also, again, I was like, oh, the more I do this, the more people are going to want to work with me. So I was kind of leveraging it in a way to be like, no other print shop has a podcast. I'm going to be the one that has that. And there's a unique way to do that. Let's set up here in front of my printing press, which is kind of a unique background. So anyways, long story short, that's kind of where I fell in love with it. But I was very on and off. I didn't take it as serious as I should have, to be honest with you. And this was 2017, 18, 19, early on stuff. So I started taking it way serious when I met you. And I realized, oh my God, this is actually a gold mine for so many people. And if we bring this to this publishing company and really develop it, this is going to be huge. And so walk me through, we talked a lot about this. Like if I'm an author and I've thought about having a show or starting a show, where would you even start? Because a lot of people are like, this is so overwhelming. There's so much to think about. I may not have the time. These are all problems we were trying to solve, but you really helped me through thinking through them in a very cool way. So can you tell me, where would someone start? If I'm an author, I got a book out or coming out, this is something I've been dabbling with. I have a really cool idea. Maybe it's an experience around my book. Where do I start?
Yeah, so I think the first question you have to answer is, should I start a podcast at all? And I think that might be a hot take I have here, is that you need to answer the question, how do I want to be in this sort of world of podcasting? Because I think I don't want to put up this sort of false dilemma that to be in the world of podcasting and share your ideas this way, you have to have a podcast. I think there are quite a few authors who would make exceptional podcast hosts and have very cool concepts for shows and could be very successful doing that. But I think by and large that the better route for most authors is going to be as a podcast guest. So I think you need to kind of audit yourself, audit your availability, your patience, because podcasting at the end of the day, the point is to build an audience, right? That's why you're doing what you're doing. You want to build up an audience of people who are listening or viewing your episodes. Now, there may be other business goals that you have attached to the show to promote your book, to potentially have guests on who are your ideal clients and build relationships and network that way. So there are other goals, but the vehicle you are using, the point of that is to get more and more and more people to listen to it the more that you do it, the more episodes you put out, the longer you go. So you need to kind of audit yourself and say, do I have the patience to have, like you said, to be serious about this, to put a strategy in place? Like, there is no silver bullet. There is no secret magic formula to having a successful podcast. Spoiler alert. It is just having a strategy and the discipline to execute on that strategy. That's really it. And there is no shame if you are an author who I'm a CEO. I am way too busy to sit down and interview guests every other week or whatever your cadence is. No shame in that whatsoever. So I think you need to have an understanding of yourself, your goals, your niche, kind of what you want this thing to be. And then ask yourself, do I want to build my own audience, or do I want to accomplish a lot of these goals I have and use other people's audiences to get the same outcome, right? Do I want to kind of go, I don't want to say the quick and easy route, but starting a podcast is a test of patience, endurance, and discipline. And if that is not something that you're really into at this point, with the goals that you have attached to your book, you need to go the podcast guest route, and we can unpack both of those options in this episode.
Love it. I think, what's interesting about this too, is for many authors, they may not have time to have a podcast show, but you might have maybe a little bit of time to have a newsletter.
Hmm.
or something where you can write? Because I feel like the media world, online, it's really like, are you writing? Or are you creating some sort of, I mean, they're both creating content, but are you creating media? Or are you creating sort of written media? And I mean, they both require writing. Let's be real here. But definitely, I think you even told me this, is that like if you're starting a podcast, you're married to it for a minimum of 10 years,
Hmm.
minimum. And you that's how far out you got to think. And you got to create something really interesting, unique. And again, is it visual? Is it on audio? Is it, the fact that you have to sit with yourself and really ask yourself if you want to be a podcast host is probably the biggest question you need to answer. And that has to be a deep one because of all of the other things we just mentioned: patience, the fact that it's hard to grow an audience, the fact that you got to set up cameras. Now, let's be real here. You know this. We're using StreamYard. This makes it easier to do podcasting, of course, right? But I still have to like create the thumbnail. I still got to get it on YouTube. I still got to, there's a bunch of things here. I still got to make a good episode, right? And so, but I enjoy this. I like to talk. Let's be real, right? I like to meet people as well. I do love books. I do love authors. So there's a couple of components that really fit the way I like to do things. And so for people out there that are thinking about this, it's really like it's got to be fun for you. It can't be a I have to do a podcast. It's got to be a I really want to. I think it would be really interesting, that route, and it's going to cost money and it's going to do all these things. So okay. So if you are to set up a podcast, let's just say like super high level, what are the top 4 or 5 things I need to have in place? If I'm like, yeah, this is the thing for me, I want to start a podcast. I think it's going to be all about mechanic shops. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm a mechanic shop owner and I just want to interview a bunch of mechanics and talk about cars because I think that's freaking cool. Also, I just think, I mean, there's probably already a podcast out there that's like that. But I think it would be really cool to film a podcast in a mechanic shop. That would be funny.
100%.
Anyways, tell me about high level 3 to 4 things to consider when you're setting something like that up. Let's say I'm that guy, I'm a mechanic. What do I need?
Yeah, so I think you've identified the number one thing that you have to figure out, which is your niche. And
Mm,
this is going to be informed in large part by your book. What's your area of expertise? What did you write your book about? That's you're going to have an idea of that when you kind of start this process. But what I will say attached to that is you need to do some competitor research and
mm,
see who are the other podcasts in your niche. Ideally, you are picking a niche that is a blue ocean. It is not this highly competitive niche that has 40 to 50 popular podcasts within it. That's something that's made our show that we do really successful, is that we picked a niche that when we started in 2019 had 1 or 2 shows in it. And we knew if we stick with this and employ our strategy and stay disciplined and be patient, we will be the best show in this niche within 3 to 4 years. And that's exactly what happened. And so, number one, pick out your niche. Number two, do some competitor research. See what else is out there because you want to differentiate yourself. You have to ask yourself, why would people looking for a mechanic shop podcast want to listen to mine as opposed to my competitors? And that's how you're going to start to figure out, okay, what does this show actually look like? You mentioned, I want to interview a bunch of people who are mechanics. I want to shoot in garages. I think that would be cool. That is absolutely one route that you can go. And if your goal, for example, is to network with more mechanics and, sync up with other shop owners and, get your book in their hands, and this is sort of like a lead magnet in a way just to build those relationships, that's cool. There's also a really cool idea of like, what if I have my co-owner of my shop and we set up 2 chairs in our shop with like really cool lighting and cameras, and this is a co-hosted commentary show, and we are talking every episode about the latest and greatest and most debated topics within our particular niche, right? And so every week we are differentiating ourselves by, you're coming to us, you like our personality, you like the look of our shop, you like the topics that we dig into. You're wondering like, how does AI affect mechanic shops? And that's what we're going to talk about this week, right? And so That's one route you can go. There is a structure question that you need to answer, and you cannot answer that, or you should not answer that until you have done that market research to figure out how am I going to set myself apart from the other shows in my niche. Again, because I don't look at a podcast as a vanity project. I look at it as an endeavor to build an audience. And to do that, you do have to figure out how are you going to market this show? How are you going to make it different from everything else? And so if you see the podcast as just, I want to have a podcast to have a podcast, I don't think that's the best way to go about it. But yeah, you can just set up the cameras and let it rip and just have fun and riff, and you'll be done after 10 episodes. iTunes, Apple Podcast is filled. It is a graveyard for abandoned feeds because people take this sort of approach. So if you have decided this is the journey you want to take, I want to help set you up for longevity and success. And so, yes, you mentioned earlier, this needs to be something that you enjoy doing. I have long said to my two co-hosts, we sit right here in this studio and film every single week. And I have always told my podcast co-hosts, if you feel yourself saying, oh, God, I got to go out and podcast tonight, it's over. We're going to pull the plug. It's done. Because this has to be something you enjoy doing. It has to be something that gives you energy.
I look forward to
taking energy from you. You have to look forward to it. You should walk out of these conversations, these recordings, feeling like a pep in your step, feeling energized. And if you're drained and exhausted, then that's probably a sign this is not for you, or there's something wrong with your setup. And so I want you to find something, a niche, a structure that is going to be life-giving and not life-draining for you, that sets you apart. And then that's where I think you can then start to dive into the more specific aspects of building a show. Like, I think when you set down to come up with a blueprint for a show, you need to look at, okay, what's our cadence? Okay, we're doing every other week. That's 24 episodes in the first year. We need to sit down and nail down these 24 episodes, or at least get some ideas on paper, right? I mean, if you could see my show planning doc, Hussein, I've got our 3 shows mapped out until the end of the year for our brand.
Amazing.
Right? And so I think that is the kind of long-term prep that you need to be doing before you ever turn on the microphone. There's so much that goes into this before you ever sit down in front of a camera or a mic.
Yeah. Okay. So in my mind, there's something else that you said to me once that really resonated, which was, also, on top of all this, there's a graveyard for a reason. There's a lot of people who've taken stabs at this and tried it and realized, okay, it's not for them. So sometimes you do need to just buy a camera, set up a microphone, and try your hand at it. See if you like it. And if anything, you can always return the products. So yes, you need some nice lighting. You need a nice camera. You need a good microphone. Those are hands down a must. And then you need a system. You need some kind of system. Okay, I can't just think about one episode. I need to think about, okay, 4 episodes a month, 2 episodes a month, whatever it is. And then what are those episodes? Am I answering questions? The whole 9, right? Who would be a good guest for this? Is it just me talking to the camera? So for me, I played around a lot. At first, a lot of the first stuff I was doing, I was just talking to the camera. I was just trying to get the reps in, because my goal was just to get to the first 100 videos, which was a lot. And I did a lot of shorts too to get through that. But man, the comfortability level that I now have with the camera, right? Because a lot of the times people are just too shy. I don't know I'm not comfortable. I don't know how to turn this thing on. Right? There's just a lot of nuances for beginners to kind of overcome. And if you really like it, if you enjoy it, you'll find that stuff interesting and you'll make time for it. And you'll spend that hour, 30 minutes every other day working on that craft. Okay, so if you decide it's not for you, then your podcast, your show goes in the graveyard like the 80% of new podcasts, right? Or something like that. What is it? Well, I forget. I think it's over 90% that most podcasts don't make it past 10 episodes or something like that. So, and there's a reason for that. This thing is hard. It's not for everyone. Not everybody has the charisma or actually talking to other people. Here's the problem though. And tell me if you agree with this or not, Josh. sometimes people come to wanting to create a podcast thinking that it's a golden bullet to get some notoriety, that their podcast is going to blow up, that they're going to start interviewing big people and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's sort of like the idea we had when we worked together. A lot of authors would say, "Oh, I want to be on Oprah or I want to be on Rogan." It's like you're not. That's not going to happen. Let's just bring you back down to, or you're not going to sell 1 million books. You're not going to be on the New York Times bestseller. It's not going to happen. And that's not to say your book still can't be successful. So it was reframing a lot of expectations. Podcasts are a saturated market at this point. If you wanted to be in on the front end, the what do they call it, the ground floor of podcasting, you needed to get in like 15 years ago. And so there is like this is not the path to like fame and notoriety and being the next Joe Rogan. It's not going to happen for you. I hate to break it to you. I hate to be the one to have to tell you this. You are not going to be that next like million downloads an episode kind of podcast. Not going to happen. That doesn't mean that you can't have a great show that is very impactful. I would much rather have 1,000 dedicated listeners who listen to every episode the minute it hits their podcast feed than 1 million downloads on my episodes from 1 million different people, right? I want to build an audience. We are not looking at these vanity metrics as the be all end all. And I think there's something too to be said for, testing out this kind of putting the training wheels on the podcast experience. Like I was talking, you mentioned Allie was on your show earlier, and we've talked about, should she have her own show? And we came to the conclusion, no, she shouldn't. She doesn't want to do it. She's too busy, but she does want to do media and do podcast appearances. And I said, well, you are an expert in your field. You know a lot about travel, but you really haven't been on camera that much to talk about it. So we need to get some clips, some samples out there that can show people that you can talk in a microphone, on a camera, hold your own, not make a fool of yourself. And so that is what I would suggest to people is, if you have that background, you have that experience, you know that this is going to be a fit for you, cool. Start with some of the stuff we just talked about. If you're on the fence about if you want to do it at all, a great place to start is just doing some, live stuff on Instagram, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or even just recording stuff, pre-producing it and putting it out there into the world on your social media platforms. Take your phone, record yourself and put it out there. See what people think. Do people like it? Did you like it? Was it an enjoyable experience? Do it again. Then do it again. And then figure out, okay, I actually kind of enjoy this. I'm pretty good at this. Then you can answer the question of, should I be doing this to build my own thing? Or can I continue to put some clips out there so that I then become attractive to people who have built their own audience and are looking for guests like me to bring onto their show to share what I have to say about whatever topic it is? And so it's the idea of like, don't buy the gym bag before you go to the gym. That's what I would say. Don't buy the expensive camera, the expensive microphone, all the lighting before you sit down and figure out, is this the route that I want to go? Let's put some training wheels on this thing before we try to ride the bike.
Well said, my friend. I love that. Okay, so now let's sort of switch gears. Okay, fine. You convinced me I'm not really the person that is going to go out and start a podcast, especially because I just spent a ton of money on my book and I want to promote it, Josh. I want to get out there. I want to talk about my book. I want to talk about myself. I want to talk about whatever. But I want to get on other people's podcasts. Okay, fine. I'll start low. I'm not going to aim for Joe Rogan right now. So give me some high level points to start with, things to think about as I go into the world of getting myself on podcast episodes.
Yeah, so this kind of harkens back to what we talked about with starting your own show, which is just research. Let's say that you are in the world of executive coaching and you want to be on executive coaching podcast. Okay. First off, you should probably be listening to those shows already. But if you're not, maybe you're just not a podcast person, you need to go to Spotify, go to Apple Podcasts. You need to begin searching for executive coaching podcast. And you need to see, okay, What are the big name shows out there? What are these shows like? How often do they put out episodes? How many of those shows have guests, right? And like you said, you can always shoot for the moon and go straight for the top. Like, this is the number one podcast in executive coaching. They have guests. I want to go for this one. Okay, fine. If it were me, I would start with either a relatively new show that is just starting to build their audience, right? Or I would start with a show that maybe you can tell because of the number of reviews or, the number of subscribers they have on, like, if they have a YouTube channel, for example, or they have social media. There are signals that you can kind of find to see, like, how big is this podcast. I would start with one of the smaller shows that is guest driven, and then look at the topics that they've had recently and identify a hole that you specifically can plug for this host and their show and their audience. Because if you're pitching them and saying, hey, I can help you on this show talk about how to manage your, client's anxiety, but they've just had 3 episodes in the last 6 months about this exact topic, that's going to be a pretty easy reject from that podcast. Or maybe like, hey, we'll do this one later. So my advice is find those shows, create a spreadsheet of like show name, host, cadence, recent episodes, and then like, where can I plug in? And then on the back end of that, Hussein, of course, if you have a book that talks about these topics, and that's a good way to think about this as well, is like, you want some episode topic ideas? Go back and read your book. Read the chapters. There you go. Each of those chapters can be an episode idea because you basically already got it outlined. But again, podcasting is not a written form of content. You have a written book that can be adapted into an article, for example, or LinkedIn post, because it's taking writing to writing. Taking your book, your expertise, and putting it on camera is a totally different experience. And so you need to continue to, as you develop these pitches for certain podcasts, you need to be putting those clips out there into the world that you can send to these hosts to say, I saw your show. It looks awesome. I love this episode you did with so-and-so about this. I wrote a book. Here it is. I had an episode idea. It's about this. I actually just did a live video on Instagram talking about this topic. If you want to check it out, if you'd like to have me on your show, I'd love to discuss this more. Right? So you are giving them a really compelling reason. Like, that is about as strong a pitch, I think, as you can make to a host about the value that you can bring to their audience. So that is how I would go about trying to begin my journey as a podcast guest. And the good news, Hussein, is once you start booking those podcasts, they beget more podcast appearances. The snowball starts rolling downhill, but this is how you get it rolling.
100%. Making it about the podcast host and their audience even more so, and showing them that you already listened to the show, that you're a fan, that you want to be on it for a specific reason to help them out, that to make it less about you, like, of course, it's about you because you're going to come through and be the expert, but more about what their needs are. That is hands down the advice that I always go back to. And I'm so glad you reiterated that because it makes so much sense, right? I mean, just think about it. Again, if you were a guest or if you were a host of a podcast show, what would you want? You want people to pitch you in a way that's not sleazy or salesy or weird or funky. It's like legit, genuine. And here's the best part. Most people that I have on my show, I would say a good 98% of the time, unless I'm reaching out to them because I want them to come on my show, I've interacted with them somewhere on LinkedIn, or maybe they've reached out to me on my website, or there's been some sort of interaction before, maybe a couple of weeks, maybe even a month before I was like, all right, yeah, come on the show. Or I saw that you have a book coming out. You know, I'm anticipating too, right? There's a bunch of authors that I have like my eyes on. So when their book launches, I know I'm going to help them out by putting them on the show. And they're going to help me out because I see them, like you said, post a video or two here and there, share about their process, share about the things. They're really collaborative, right? It's the ones that you don't want somebody to come on your show and be like just super cocky and like annoying and salesy and like it's all about them. Those are the worst guess. I'm sorry.
You got to have, that's the other kind of benefit of doing sort of this like media kind of beta test on your end, is that work in and of itself is rewarding. You're not just creating audition tapes that only the studios are going to see, to use a bad metaphor. You are putting stuff out there into the world that is going to help you accomplish your goals anyway. You're putting out that, that Instagram reel. You're putting out, you're doing, like I've been working with Allie on doing webinars on LinkedIn and on Facebook, talking about, topics and resorts that she wants to sell. And so that is going to give her ammo to go to these hosts and say, hey, look what I've done. You can see my experience on mic, on camera. You can see how I handle myself. You can see my personality, my expertise. But that is those bits of media are also helping her achieve her goals, regardless if she never books a single podcast appearance. And so it is this.
How do they help her? Will you go there for a second there?
Yeah. So they allow her to, the beautiful part about content creation nowadays is if you create one thing, like a live stream, for example, we spin that out into 4 or 5 other types of content. And so, she has gotten to where she is primarily by word of mouth and by the marketing and the content creation that she has done. And so that is, we are just trying to put kind of gas on the fire here when it comes to her content creation. So many people, she always asks, how did you find me, if she doesn't know them? And so many people have said, oh, Instagram. And so, or I looked you up and I saw you had all these Google reviews, or I looked you up on Facebook. And so there is a social validation that comes from, even if you can set up analytics and see like this piece of content led this person directly to me, that's awesome. But there is a social validation aspect now of, we always joke, what's the first thing you do when you find out about someone and you figure out if you want to work with them? You Google them, right? Now I think it's evolved even further to where it's like, especially if it's like a service provider, someone like Allie, who's in the service business as a travel advisor, I want to kind of interact with Allie. I want to get to know her before I ever sit down and have her plan my trip. And so there is this, not only is she doing this with like the social verification with the Google reviews, Facebook reviews, all that, she is putting herself out there and letting people see her personality. And I can hear a lot of her consult calls when they happen because we both work from home. Yeah. And I'll be like, how do you know that person? And she's like, I've never met them before. They were a new client. But people come to these calls comfortable, like they've known her their whole life. And so even if you don't have the analytics to tell you this piece of content led this person directly to me, there is this like social goodwill and interest and intrigue that you build up having a content library that will serve you very well, regardless of what kind of service or industry you are in. And when you create one piece of content, and I think a podcast or a video is the best piece of content to start from, because I think it's the easiest to spin out into other forms of content, it becomes a lot easier to keep that train rolling.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I follow a lot of those rules as much as I can because you help teach a lot of those rules to me, man. So I think familiarity is a big thing in our consciousness, right? The more familiar we become with people, the easier it is to do the one thing that matters the most, which is trust, right? So if I see you always talking about travel advising and giving me tips and, showing me things and places and things I need to know or updates or trends, and you're just living in that world, and I always see you on my feet because I like to travel and I like to know the best things. Okay, great. Yeah, you're going to be probably my go-to person for whatever, because a lot of times, especially today, especially with TikTok, right? Like there's no search bar. There's no, the content comes to you, right? The experts come to you, the person comes to you, and now they're in your feed. And whether you choose to follow them or subscribe or whatever, that's on you, of course, if it's interesting. I always tell people stop thinking it's social media and it's interest media. And if you're an expert, then how do you make your expertise interesting so that people can become interested? And a great way to do that, honestly, video is king. Besides 3D, like being in person with things, video is king, right? So like own that and get in front of a camera with your phone and share your expertise. Like you said, those training wheels. And later on, if you're like, oh, I want to start a podcast or I want to start a show or whatever, fantastic. But just having those sound bites, like you said, taking a webinar and having those sound bites, having those clips, having those things that you can take and share on different platforms helps you get closer to that trust. There is no golden ticket, right? And it's not you need to do more and more and more. It's that you need to just stay consistent.
Yep.
Oh,
stay consistent and work harder, work smarter, not harder, man. I mean, that's for all the kind of fuss and hubbub about all these tools and AI and stuff. Like, we are living in a golden age of being able to take one thing and turn it into 6 when it comes to content, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
Like, we can record this episode, and then this can spin out into clips for YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram,
that's exactly what
Facebook,
we're going to do.
TikTok, everything. You can take snippets from the transcript and turn them into LinkedIn posts. You could turn this into 4 or 5 articles or newsletter, email newsletter entries, right? You can create audiograms. So much. You could clip this out into 4 or 5 chunks of the video so that people want to watch something that's 8 minutes as opposed to, 60 minutes or whatever. So there are so many ways to spin stuff out that you don't need to think about it in silos. You need to think about it holistically and having a strategy. And I think it's intimidating for people to think, oh, I don't have anything interesting to share, and I don't want to get up here and talk about how I can help people because that feels kind of salesy. Here's what I would say is that start with stories. And the great way to do this, a great kind of frame to think about this is, what is the last really interesting conversation that you had with a client? What were you all talking about? Because chances are, if you think that's interesting, other people will find it interesting as well, right? And so rather than saying, I don't know what to say, I don't know how to get on here and offer people value, get on Instagram, wherever your platform is, get on there and tell that story. You will be amazed. Hussein, this was hilarious. This was like early December. It was before Christmas. Allie's been posting every single day on Instagram since like 2021, I think. Yeah. Early 2021. And she went mega viral. Last December, right before Christmas. She had a post do over 10 million views. And it was the stupidest, most random thing that you've ever seen. And so I say that because I want to illustrate the point that you never know what is going to resonate with people. And so don't get twisted around the axle thinking I have nothing interesting to say. That's just complete BS. You're having these interesting conversations with clients, with colleagues, at networking events. You're reading something interesting on LinkedIn, and you're like, well, I don't agree with that at all. Like Allie got featured when she went on and talked about Southwest getting rid of open seating. She got featured on LinkedIn's newsfeed for that particular story. Yeah. And so don't get wrapped around the axle thinking that you have to reinvent the wheel or come up with something brilliant or insightful. Tell a story, share a conversation or a moment that you had recently, because you will be amazed at what resonates with people that may just feel like very benign and kind of average and ordinary to you.
Yeah, man, that's so spot on right there. And such good insight because, I think, like you said, we just get so caught up in what other people are going to think and what they're going to say. And how can I prevent myself from basically protecting myself and my feelings from how people are going to react to this. But the funny thing is, also we in the back of our minds, it'd be nice if our post went viral. It'd be nice if my content got seen. It'd be nice if people landed on my website and booked calls with me or hired me to speak or engage with my content. It's like the things that we want are really on the other side of consistency and showing up and telling those stories, one miniature little story at a time, and having fun with it and like enjoying. Like, dude, if you go back to 2020, 2019, writing a newsletter was so like it felt arduous. No way. Like you couldn't convince me. Today, I'm literally looking forward to the next newsletter I'm gonna write. I'm like looking forward to it. I can't wait.
And let me ask you this, Hussein.
Yeah.
Are you seeing more success with that newsletter now that you're into
100%.
it? Like, that is
100%.
we have a team,
So
a
much.
wonderful team of creators with our brand, the IDP show. Yeah. And I always tell folks, like, if you aren't feeling this anymore, you have to tell me, because I'm not going to be disappointed if we have to find a replacement for your show or find a new host or whatever. I'm going to be disappointed if you're going in, really like tortured and like you're dragging yourself to your desk where your microphone is to record, and it's draining and you hate it, because that is going to show up and people are going to notice it. And the 100%. Same thing is true in reverse. People can tell enthusiasm is infectious. And so if you don't think it matters the kind of energy that you bring to whatever content you are creating, you are dead wrong. People can tell when your heart is in it, when you're excited about it, and they want to be part of something like that. And that's the other thing too that you mentioned is like consistency, sticking with it. You notice I said Allie started posting on her Instagram in early 2021 and went viral 3 full years later. And it was completely random, right? 3 years of posting every single day. So you figure that's probably about 1,000 posts that she's put out over that 3-year span. So amazing. Stay consistent, and again, set yourself
and learn about it.
And learn, and because that's going to allow you, it's going to feel less arduous and less difficult to sit down and do it. Because I'm not going to sit here and say it's all rainbows and sunshine. There are times when you're like, I got to grind through it, man. Like I'm busy this week. I'm sick. I don't feel good, but you just got to grind it out and you got to get it done. And so just immersing yourself. Like I'm in the world of fantasy football. I am listening to fantasy football and football related content every single day. So now I can get on and riff with someone with 0 notes and hold my own because I'm immersed in it. So yes, learn, because that will make it everything so much easier for you.
So much easier. One of my favorite things about being a podcast host and doing podcasting now is I genuinely, like, I look forward to my next guest and like look forward to like, I sometimes, honestly, I don't read the whole book. I will flip through it. I'll read the back. I'll read the beginning. And sometimes I'll be super immersed. I'll read the whole thing, but it's not about the book or the author. It's really about like, man, can I create a good experience? Can I create, like when they go to my website and book their podcast with me, what is that going to look and feel like? What happens after? What are they going to receive? I want them to have an experience that is better than the next host. There's been so many people, not to talk madness or whatever about other people or anything like that, or other shows. There's been so many authors that will come on the show and be like, man, you're so organized. This is so clean. It was so easy to book with you. And thank you for all the assets. Thank you for all the video stuff. Right. So I'm thinking about it just from a host perspective, right? Like I love creating an experience, which is why there's another component to my podcast, which is in a van, right? Because I want to like create an experience memorable for me, memorable for them. Here's why. People talk. And that's the best that's the most original marketing on planet Earth, right? And not only talk, they'll tell a story, like you just said, right? They have a snippet of that story. And if that, forgive me, my dog is barking. What a wonderful snippet to that experience. Sorry about that. There's the mailman. She freaks out. Happens every time.
Not the mailman.
Well, UPS.
Yeah.
So the point I'm trying to make is I try to think about stories in reverse. So I say, like, what is the story I want them to share? What is the story I want them to tell? And can I create the conditions for that story to happen sort of organically and almost feel like perfume? It just sort of happened like on their in their mind, right? But what I'm trying to do is create the conditions, again, from my logo, from having a better camera, every little aspect. So it's the same the other way around for a guest, right? It's, can you create the conditions when you're on a show so that you too are memorable, someone that can like reference you, or be like, oh man, I read, like my friend Safar, who I'm going to have on, his name is Ravi, who wrote a book called Safar right behind me.
Mm-hmm.
Great guy, immigrant. Like, we share so many similarities. I can't wait to have him on the show. Phenomenal book, right? But he too has that presence that, like, he's been on a lot of these things. He's done the videos. And so the thing that excites me is I get to create the condition to have a story made up in someone's mind, and I can narrate that in a way for them so that they can go and share that. And that's how I've been able to grow my show. Like, for me personally, that's how I've been able to grow my LinkedIn, my newsletter. Is like, I just think about, like, how can I make this worthy of sharing? What is worthy here? What's the sentence? What's the one liner? And the more you think about that, that's how you get better. And so I study this stuff, dude. Like, just last night, I was up literally studying the guy who who does the show. Why can't I think of his name right now? It's called How I Write. The podcast, a rite of passage, all that stuff. Phenomenal. But I was like sitting there. I went through 10 of his videos, and I was just studying his first 2 questions to every guest. I just wrote them down. I was just studying. I was learning. So in order to be not only a show host and like doing this stuff, I'm learning, like, how do I ask better questions? How do I make this interesting? How do I, because again, this is a long journey, and that's exciting to me. And so if you're a person who wants to start a podcast or be on other people's podcasts, what is the interesting thing that you can always come back to and share that story, even in different ways? Bro, I'm a refugee. I've told that story, I don't know, close to 10,000 times at this point in my life. But there was always something that I either like remember, or like, I'll tell a story about how my mom cooked, in the little hole that we, like, it was like random little things. But that story is there's always a new pixel. There's always a new pixel, right? And that's okay. Like, Jay-Z's been telling us that he sold crack every album that he's ever made.
It's true.
Hasn't changed. But I'll still listen to some Jay-Z. Like, it's just fun, right? Kind of we're on a riff there. But what are your thoughts around? Okay, so now I'm a guest. I'm showing up on podcasts. I got 3 or 4 under my belt, maybe 5 or 10. What do I do with those podcasts? I mean, we said we can disseminate them. We can split them up. Personally, I feel like they got to live on your website, no questions. But can I start a YouTube channel, maybe a show or something that I can put them in and refer people to, so that I can have a new cycle, so that I can get the next bigger show? Like, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I think you need a portfolio, like a media page of your website. If the host is doing it right, it's already out there on YouTube, so you can't put it up on your own YouTube page. It'll get flagged, right? So you may be able to ask about creating clips, like you said. I think chopping that up and disseminating it out is sort of the main thing I would try to do with that, because if my time is scarce, which is kind of the main sort of driver behind like why I think someone like an author would choose the sort of podcast guest route, is my time is scarce, so I want to make a maximum impact with what I'm doing in this particular realm of podcasting. The number one thing to do is just using that to then, like we've talked about, be the flywheel for other content for you. Yes, I do agree you need to have a really clean, beautiful, well put together page on your site that features all of your media, including your podcast appearances. But I mean, the main thing you need to be doing is thinking about what's the next show I'm going to be on, And then you need to be thinking about, as you're kind of putting these ideas out there, you know where my mind's going. What's my next book going to be about? Right? And so this use this opportunity you've been given. If you want to start with content from your book, right? And kind of use that as sort of a stepping stone to get into the world of podcasting, that's great. I think that's the way to do it. You've got a proven list of ideas here. People can check out the book, they can validate your ideas. But at some point, I want to use these podcast appearances to start testing out some new ideas. Because once you have the clips, you are going to be sought out as a podcast guest. That paradigm is going to shift from I'm pitching myself to people are pitching me. And so at a certain point, another shift I want to see authors make in this example is I want to start testing out new ideas. I want to start getting feedback on some things that I want to put in book number 2. Because the only thing better than a book is a second book, is a third book, is a fourth book, right? And so that is such a great way to begin field testing those ideas, to begin getting feedback, to begin refining those ideas. Because guess what? You're not just going to get feedback from the host. Man, I love that idea, that nugget you shared about X, Y, and Z. If that show has any sort of audience, you're going to start getting feedback from people in the comments on YouTube, comments on Spotify when they chop it up into clips and put it on Instagram, you know, the comments on those posts. So you're going to get this sort of free kind of feedback cycle that you can use to start to put together these ideas for other types of media you want to do. I said a book. I think that's a good way to kind of think about it, is like what's going in book number 2, but it can also be, you know, a newsletter that you want to start or some other form of media that you want to put together. But that is how I would start to use that, especially once that paradigm shifts from I am going and pitching myself to I am now sought after. That is when I think you start looking at, I can start making the shift to testing out some new ideas.
Beautiful. What's something I've left behind that we can pick back up? What's something that we can wrap this up with and reiterate, or something that I've left outside of this conversation?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just really doing that work on the front end. I think we've covered a lot of what I wanted to come into this conversation with, so I just want to reiterate this here, is that like the foundation of a house, the success of your show is going to be determined by the work that you do on the front end. That's not to say that you're not going to adjust the show, adapt the show, adapt your approach if you're going the podcast guest route. But the success that you're going to see, I always tell folks, don't start expecting like real audience growth and views and downloads and plays and comments and shares and all that stuff on your show until at least 18 months in. If I could show you the chart for our podcast that shows the plays all time, it's like this, and then about 18 months in, it does this. And so that success is not going to come if you don't do the work on the front end. As exciting as it is to just like jump in and start talking into a microphone without a long-term strategy, this is just going to be like dust in the wind, man. It's going to blow away and be gone before you know it. So I know it's exciting. You've got this book. You might feel pressed a little bit to find ways to market it. If you're not already if you're working on your book right now and you're having these conversations with whoever is helping you with your book, start thinking about that. Start answering that question we talked about. Am I a podcast host or am I a podcast guest? 95% of you listening, watching this, are going to be a podcast guest. So I want you to start thinking about, how am I going to pitch myself to these shows? What are the shows? And if you start there and don't try to jump ahead to step 4, 5, and 6, you're going to be successful. And two, Hussein, something we didn't really talk about as much in detail is, what are your goals? What do you want to get out of this experience, right? If the whole goal is just to promote your book and get the word out and feel like you're giving your best to market the book and get and try to pump up sales or get clients or whatever, that's cool, right? But really sit down and try to figure out what those goals are, because that's how you're going to measure success, right? And so, yeah, man, just do the work on the front end. And I say that because I think a lot of people that are going to watch this and say, Psh, I could have my own show. I can talk to people. I like people. I'm funny. I'm good on camera. We'll very quickly find out when they do that kind of preparatory step in the process that this is not a good fit for them. And so take the time on the front end, do the work, do it the right way, and you're going to have success, whatever that looks like for you.
Well said, my friend. I think that's a great way to end the episode, but I do want to do like a round two because I feel like there's a few things I want to go deeper on, especially as like being a guest. But I love the setting up the goals. Look, you got to know why you're doing this. It's kind of the same thing like why you wrote the book, right? Media in general is your book is part of that media. It's not the thing. And I sort of, especially working with you and working at Scribe and all the different things that I've been able to do in the last like 6-7 years at this point. Media, even when I was promoting my print shop, even when I was, promoting the hookah bar back in the day, like on Instagram and Facebook, like I've owned multiple businesses and I've used media to promote those businesses. It was never about the thing. It was about what happens when you're at the thing. Mm-hmm. It was about the experience. So I always wanted to make it to be like, what's it like to work with this print shop? And then I started refugees and like give back to the local refugee community or whatever. Again, ties to me, my world, right? What's it like to be on the Rising Author podcast? It's like this. What's it like to go to this coffee shop or whatever? Like, what is the personality, the thing that people will talk about you the most? And like, you already have that thing. That's the personality you want to bring to the table. You just so happen to have a book. You just so happen to have this consulting business that fits perfectly with what they need. You just so it's like, it's never about the thing. It's always about the feeling that the thing causes, right? Well, and that's where if I can tell authors one thing always, it's just like, what is the thing that we're actually marketing?
Well, and you mentioned it earlier, brand, right? Like, I think that's kind of a gross word nowadays. And, I think it's a misconceived word because so many people, when they think of brand, think of how the word started, like a cattle brand that showed you what farmer this cow belonged to. And so people think logo, colors, all this sort of stuff. I heard it explained very well. The best explanation I ever heard of a brand, it's what sticks with me today, is it's every touch point that a customer has with your company, your people, your brand. It's, yes, your colors and logo, but it's also how the people at your company answer the phone when somebody calls. That whole A to Z experience is your brand. And that's what you've been talking about in large part, is what is your personal brand, right? For you, like what is your brand for the Rising Authors podcast, right? And so I am thinking about that. I'm a brand owner, right? I'm a brand founder. I am thinking about when we have customers subscribe to our website, what do I want that feeling to be? The verbiage on the page, the colors, the directions, everything, every step of the process, every touch point, I want to be thinking about and be intentional about constructing it, because good brand experiences don't happen by accident. It's like my favorite piece of marriage advice has always been that having a good marriage is an active thing. It's like an active exercise. It's like floating down the river. You're not going to like stay together when you're floating. You have to actively work to come together. Same thing with a brand, man. It doesn't happen by accident. You don't fall backwards into a good brand experience. You're going to fall backwards into a bad or just sort of like middle of the road, unimpressive brand experience. Creating something memorable like what you were talking about as a podcast host, as an author, as a business owner, as a podcast guest, really is intentionality around every single touch point. So be thinking about that. Your book is a piece of that, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. And how you put the rest of those pieces together is going to help you get the most mileage out of this very important piece that you've poured a lot of time and money and energy and effort into, which is your book.
Well said. Josh Raymer, everyone, thank you so much, my friend, for coming on the show, enlightening us and me with always good words of wisdom. I will leave you with this one thing that Josh has always hit me with. When I came to him for advice on whether I should do the podcast in the van and, go up the West Coast and how I should do this or how I should do that, this is what he said to me, and this is what I'm going to say to you. Just do it. It's the only way to find out if you're going to do it or not, is to do it. So go out there, whether you're trying to be a guest, whether you're trying to start your own thing, do it. Do the homework, do the necessary research, do the thing, and the thing will reveal itself. On that note, y'all be good to each other. Practice gratitude and patience. Take care. Peace.